If one company accounts for 1/5 of South Korea GDP, is it still just a company? Today, we use data to break down how Samsung built South Korea into a global technology superpower. First, look at a few numbers. In 2022, Samsung Electronics posted revenue of about 302 trillion Korean won, roughly 14% of South Korea GDP. Total revenue of Samsung Group approached 20% of GDP.
Samsung did not start in technology. In 1938, Lee Byung-chul founded Samsung Trading Company in Daegu, initially exporting dried fish, vegetables, and fruit, then moving into sugar refining, textiles, insurance, and retail. In 1969, Samsung Electronics was established, producing black and white televisions, refrigerators, and washing machines. In 1974, Lee Kun-hee personally bought 50% of Korea Semiconductor, which was merged into Samsung Electronics in the 1980s. That was Samsung entry into chips.
Samsung move into chips was not accidental. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Park Chung-hee government pursued export-led growth and heavy and chemical industry policies, giving chaebols low-interest loans, tax breaks, and foreign exchange support. In 1983, the Korean government designated semiconductors as a national strategic industry. That same year, Samsung Electronics announced it would enter DRAM, bought 64K DRAM technology licensing from Micron, and set up an R&D center in Silicon Valley. State capital plus chaebol execution was the core of this model.
The catch-up speed can be measured on a timeline. In 1984, Samsung developed 64K DRAM, about 4 years behind the US and Japan. In 1986, it developed 1M DRAM, narrowing the gap to about 2 years. In 1992, it developed 64M DRAM, basically on par with the US and Japan. In 1994, it became the first to develop 256M DRAM. Samsung used 1 decade to close the memory chip technology gap from 4 years to 0.
Behind this was counter-cyclical investment. When global memory chip prices collapsed in 1984 and 1985, Samsung increased investment and expanded capacity. During the 2007 to 2008 financial crisis, Samsung Electronics capital spending rose instead of falling. And after the market recovered in 2010, its share expanded significantly. Counter-cyclical expansion increases supply during industry downturns, squeezes competitors, and wins higher share when the industry recovers.
After memory chips succeeded, Samsung applied the same logic to mobile phones. In 1993, Lee Kun-hee proposed in Frankfurt that everything except your wife and children must change, pushing a shift from quantity to quality. In 1995, Samsung destroyed about 150,000 defective phones. In 2009, it launched the Galaxy Android phone series. In 2010, Galaxy S sales exceeded 20 million units. In 2012, Samsung phone shipments overtook Nokia, making it #1 in the world.
Another Samsung advantage is vertical integration. Samsung Electronics includes a semiconductor division, a mobile and home appliance division, and a display division. The wider group also has Samsung's D batteries, Samsung Electro, Mechanics, and Samsung Heavy Industries. The memory chips, screens, some processors, and batteries used in phones can all be supplied in-house. This structure lowers external dependence and allows faster internal technology iteration.
R&D spending underpins these businesses. In 2022, Samsung Electronics R&D expenditure was about 24.9 trillion won, roughly $19 billion, accounting for about 8.2% of revenue, ranking among the top 5 globally. In US patent grants, Samsung has long ranked in the top 2. In displays, Samsung Display has held more than 70% of the small and medium-sized OLED market for years.
For the Korean economy, Samsung is now a structural presence. In 2022, Samsung Electronics revenue was about 302 trillion won, and South Korea GDP was about 1.67 trillion US dollars. Samsung Electronics accounted for about 14% of GDP, and Samsung Group total revenue approached 20%. Samsung Electronics alone made up about 20% of the Kospi stock market capitalization. In 2022, South Korea semiconductor exports were about 129.2 billion US dollars, or 18.9% of total South Korea exports, and Samsung was the largest exporter.
The global memory chip market shows this even more clearly. In 2023, in DRAM, Samsung held about 42% share, SK Hynix about 28%, Micron about 23%. meaning South Korea companies together held about 70%. In NAND flash, Samsung held about 31%, and together with SK hynix and others, South Korea controlled more than half. Global memory chip supply is highly concentrated in South Korea, and Samsung is the largest single supplier.
This concentration also creates risk. The South Korean economy is often called the Republic of Samsung. In the 2016 to 2017 Pascal's RK Jun High influence. Peddling scandal Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong was convicted of bribery and sentenced to prison, later receiving a suspended sentence, parole and a presidential pardon. When semiconductor prices fall, South Korea exports and GDP are hit directly. The memory chip price declines in 2019, and in 2022 to 2023 both caused South Korea exports to drop.
Talent and the government R&D system were also key. The Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute, ETRI, took part in memory and communications technology development in the 1980s and 1990s. The government pushed CDMA mobile communications, helping Samsung accumulate communication patents. Samsung brought in many Korean American engineers from the US and Japan. Hwang Chang-yu proposed the Hwang Law, which said memory chip density would double every year. Samsung also trained process engineers through an internal semiconductor academy.
So the Samsung path can be summarized as follows. National industrial policy provided loans, tax breaks, and foreign exchange. Chaeble's concentrated resources on semiconductors, countercyclical investment, and vertical integration expanded market share. Profits from memory chips were reinvested into R&D and downstream businesses like phones and displays. The result is that South Korea has entered the global top tier in memory chips, smartphones, and small and medium-sized OLED displays.